Hi, for those of you who have been following me for a while, you're never going to believe why I went to jail and what I got charged with. In today's video, I am going to share with you what happened that night, how it drastically changed my wellness journey, and what I should have done that evening that I didn't do, and some tips so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. So this probably happened about, 10, maybe 15 years ago. Anyway, I wasn't a young, rebellious teenager at the time. I was an adult, and I had just got done moving my son Frank into his apartment that he was moving into when he first was going into college. And I can remember that it was late at night, well past midnight when I was coming home. I was tired, exhausted, feeling run down. I was in my rugged, raggedy old pickup truck, and I pulled into my driveway, and I noticed that there was a police car sitting across the street. And we lived in a rural area at the time. So he was sitting at the house across the street, and I thought that was kind of strange, but whatever. So then I lived up at the top of a gravel dirt driveway at the top of the hill. And so he starts following me up to the top of the hill. And at first I thought, oh, how nice, he's going to make sure that I get home safely. It's late at night. And, I thought, well, that's really sweet. And then about halfway up my driveway, which maybe is, like a quarter mile, eighth of a mile long. It's not a real long driveway. It probably, takes less than 5 minutes to get to the top. But anyway, about halfway up, and it's on the steep part of the gravel driveway at this point, he turns on his blue lights. And I was like, what the heck? What's going on? And my sister at the time, she lived on the way up the drive too, about halfway up. But I just passed, he turned on his blue lights before I passed her house, because the thought crossed my mind, should I pull in there? And because this is kind of strange. And it kind of made me feel a little unsettled. But I thought, no, I don't want to wake him up. I'm sure, this is fine or whatever. So finish going up to the top of my driveway, because like I said, it was pretty short. It probably really only takes like a minute or two to get to the top of the driveway at that. And I get to the top, I park the truck, and the police officer just comes racing out of his vehicle. He was really angry, yelling at me, screaming, and I was sitting in the vehicle at this time, so I rolled down my window, and he started yelling at me for not stopping immediately on the driveway when he turned on his blue lights, which, mind you, was on the steep part of the gravel, and I just didn't think it was safe, and it was, just a little bit further. Anyway, he was really, really fired up. And the more that I respectfully answered his questions and tried to talk to him, the angrier he seemed to get, which I thought was really bizarre, because he was just raging. He told me that, I was fleeing and eluding him, which, mind you, my driveway dead-ended into a forest that you can't go any further. But I don't know what set him off. Maybe he had a bad day. Anyway, this went on for a period of time where I was trying to talk calmly, and I realized after a little while that was going to get me nowhere, so I decided maybe I better be quiet and just stop talking. And that only made him madder. He ended up telling me that he was going to teach me a lesson, that he was taking me to jail. And, I was like, for what? And he's told me for fleeing and eluding him, which I told him was ridiculous. And of course, then he said that, was I trying to tell him he was lying? And so, it went on from there. So at that point, he put me in handcuffs and put me in the back of the cruiser. And then and it was just the one cop. Anyway, puts me in the back of the police cruiser in handcuffs. And then he proceeds to ask me if I live at the house where I was. And I told him, yes, that was my home. That's what I told him. And so then, without even asking my permission, he gets in my purse and rifles through my purse. He gets my keys, and he goes up and he opens the door to my house. That felt very violating. He took me to jail that night to teach me my lesson. And the jail was about an hour drive away, because I don't know, maybe my local county jail was full. Anyway, so we go to Boone County Jail, a bigger facility, and they bring me in to book me. And at that point, you know, when I get mad and upset, it's just like tears, which makes me only more mad at myself. But that's how I was reacting. And I can remember that the ladies that booked me that night, they were, I felt like they kind of felt sorry for me, because they ended up putting me in a cell. Well, first, actually, I had to wait. I got put in like a holding cell, and I sat there for, I don't know, it was probably an hour and a half. It's like just a room that was concrete floors, nothing to sit on. So I was sitting on the concrete there, and I hadn't been feeling good. So anyway, the ladies that booked me were fairly nice and put me in a cell with someone else that seemed to be a first timer like me, which was across the cell from the majority of the women in the jail facility, which were in another cell, and it looked honestly a lot rougher to me. So I mean, that was one good thing, but I was furious. I was so enraged that I was taken to jail for doing nothing in my mind, you know, for going up my driveway, and because a cop had a really bad day or whatever happened. So it was on a Friday night, and they told me that since it was on the weekend, that, you know, I'd probably have to stay in there all weekend, because I would have to wait to have a judge set bail for me and have someone be able to pay the bail, but that probably wouldn't happen until Monday morning. So here I was faced with spending a long weekend in jail, already not feeling well, and like I said, that was probably the maddest I have ever been in my entire life. It was probably the closest thing I have ever felt to rage. I think because of the feeling of injustice, and that there was absolutely nothing that I could do about it. So when I got my phone call, I wasn't sure who to call at the time, to be honest. My daughter was out of town, and I thought to myself, I don't want to call my son, because he is just going to get so angry too that he's probably going to end up in a jail cell, you know, in the same facility that I was in. So I didn't want to call him. And my fiance, now my husband Kurt, I at that point in time hadn't remembered his phone number. It was on my phone, and I called him all the time. We had been together for, you know, over a year, but I just hadn't memorized his phone number. And the phone was sitting in my purse, still in the pickup truck at my house, because I wasn't allowed to bring anything with me. So my phone call went to my mother. And, you know, at this point, who knows, I guess it was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and my mother gets, you know, this phone call from me, and I don't have much time, but I tell her, you know, briefly what happened. I didn't know what would happen from there. I just wanted her to know, or wanted somebody to know, that I was in jail. So, you know, unbeknownst to me, my mother then gets on the phone, and she's calling the county sheriff and trying to see what she can do to get me out of jail and you know, remedy this situation. But at that point, I didn't even know she was doing all that. So I'm sitting in jail, just letting my anger really build inside me. I'm crying. I'm just like going over everything in my head again and again. So I spent probably an entire evening fueling this anger, these feelings that, you know, of injustice, and thinking about other people over the years and centuries and everything that, you know, honestly had you know, went to jail for better reasons than I did, for actually, you know, doing something that you know, helped people in the end. But yeah, so that night I sat and I just fumed all night long, and I was so angry. So it wasn't until much later that I realized the impact that allowing myself to get so angry for such a long period of time had on my health. And, you know, in hindsight, when I think back about it, there are some things that I recognize now that I probably should have done, could have done, and didn't do. And I'd like to share a few of those tips with you. So one of them, I guess the first one, is when you recognize that you find yourself in a situation where you are feeling such an intense emotions. If you can put a little reminder in your brain to just recognize that this is happening, number one, so that you can hopefully make a choice to do something about it and not let it rage for hours like I did. You have to recognize at that point, through the intensity of the emotion, that you're hurting yourself and it's unhealthy for you in the long term. So that would be the first thing. Try to think about little bell to go off in your head. Hey, yeah, I'm angry right now, but now what can I do about it to help me? Because staying angry, particularly when there's absolutely, at that point in time, for me, there was absolutely nothing I could have done about it. What I could have done, though, is taken care of me. So what are a couple of the things that I could have done differently that evening had I recognized that, yes, this intense emotion was not good to feel for a long time? I could have done some deep breathing. I could have closed my eyes and focused on my breath using that practice of mindfulness. And that's why practicing mindfulness on a regular basis is so helpful, because if you do it regularly, hopefully, unlike what I did, you will recognize when it would be extremely helpful for you to use it, and you will take advantage of it. So, and shifting your attention away from what had happened, what is happening that you're unable to control, to something that you are able to control. Physically, your breathing. And honestly, you can control your emotions too. That's a choice. At that point in time, it was a choice I wasn't willing to make. I wanted to be angry, and so I was. The bad part is how long I let that anger fester. So then the other thing that I could have done too is close my eyes and thought and envisioned myself being in a different place. So like a happy place, if you will, someplace that, another way essentially of shifting your attention to calm your body down. So these are three tips that you can, a few tips rather, that you can use for any intense emotion and anytime you find yourself feeling this way, whether you're getting angry in an argument. In that case, if you can leave, I couldn't that evening, but if you are able to separate yourself and find distance, obviously that would be the first thing to try and do. And then to recognize the intensity of the emotion you're feeling. Third, to utilize some type of technique to calm your body down. Even if you let yourself really feel that emotion for a period of time, just not letting it go on for hours like I did. So in part 2 of this video, I'll be sharing what happened with the rest of my jail experience and the later long-term effects of what happened from that experience in the days, weeks, months to come, and what I did about that and how it impacted my journey.